Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. We've been really looking forward to having you here with us in the show's community, and I think your journey is very interesting. So, thank you for joining us. I'll quickly introduce you to the community. We have with us Mahima Vashisht. She is the writer of the brilliant newsletter Womening in India. She has also previously worked with organizations like UNICEF and World Bank, but she's here with us today because before all of this, she was a civil servant. So we have someone who actually did transition, but it was after clearing the exam, right? And we're just here to know that part of your story. So yeah. So if it's okay, we'll begin.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Gayatri.
Okay, great. So let's start at the beginning. I think initially you had taken the usual path, right? You did your engineering from NIT and then MBA from IIM. Uske baad, how did you decide that, okay, civil services is something that you want to try and you want to explore that?
So, like any middle class family, my parents used to talk about UPSC when I was a kid a bit, and then after during and after my MBA as well. But I never took it too seriously because, like you said, I was on that path of the done path of engineering MBA, and I had no clue what UPSC was or what that route entailed for life. I have no family member who's been a civil servant before. So I did my MBA, and right after my MBA, I graduated in 2009, which is when right before that the subprime crisis had hit.
Yeah.
So our entire batch's placement of outlook was much bleaker than the batches before us in terms of international postings and big pay packages. All of that was not on the cards for us at all. I ended up, which kind of actually in hindsight worked well for me because I don't think I would have been happy at a big bank or a big consulting firm, even if I had landed a job there. So I ended up with a small boutique consulting firm in Mumbai, and our client was the State Bank of India. And that was like one big client we had, and we worked on that project for 3 years. So it was a very, very long project. It's not a typical consulting project where a few months you go in and come out. It was a very long engagement. We were almost a part of the bank family for those 3 years. And I got an opportunity to work very closely with public sector employees and more importantly with various communities of India. So I traveled the entire country, small corners that you would not typically visit on a tourism trip. So and I've interacted with members of small communities. So say I work with these women who are weaving saris and Patni saris near Nasik, stone carvers of Konark. So when I traveled the country, it was a life-changing experience for me because I came from this IIT-IIM bubble where you see the world in a very limited way, and everybody around you has the same one way of looking at the world. But reality is much bigger than that, and real India is very different from that. And when I got to interact with all of these communities, I realized that very things that are very small for us, say small technical access to small technologies or small financial instruments, can be life changing for many communities in India. And the I saw the power of the bank, of course, in that sense, the financial behemoth that is the State Bank of India. But also, I realized that even bigger power lies with the government of India and the say the IS officers who are giving direction to these banks in their districts, and how much more life-changing power they would have if just a bank could change lives so much. So that is what attracted me to UPSC. So like I said, that was a 3 year long project, and towards the end of that project, I decided to write the exam. And I think I was the CSE 2011 batch. So I wrote in 11 and started my training in 12.
Okay. Okay. So when you decided that you will go for the exam, did you also go for the preparation process, joining a coaching institution, all of that, or were you doing this on your own?
So I was in a job anyway, and I did not want to quit my job and sit at home to prepare because I mean, it's a competitive exam, as you all know, and it's there is no guarantees with this exam. And it's once I understood the format, it's like a year-long format. So I didn't want to be unemployed for a year and invest that much time, effort, energy in something that is for me a very distant dream at that point. So I decided to take a sabbatical from work. I wrote the screening exam while I was working, and I cleared it. I think because there was a logic element that was added just that year, and I had done CAT, so for me that part was
Easy.
very easy. So it made it easier for me to clear screening, even though my I think my general knowledge was not as great as most people's. But then I cleared screening. Uske baad I thought, okay, means cannot be done just like that while on the side while you're working. So I took a 2 month sabbatical from work, took a sabbatical for 2 months, went back home and started figuring out how one prepares for a UPSC main. Uh, I realized the two optional thing. And most people told me at that point, anyone I spoke to told me कि नहीं हो सकता है. This is too short a time.
Yeah.
And are you preparing for next year or the year after that? They'd be like, no, this year. They'd be like, no, this is ridiculous.
Got this.
Most people told me it's ridiculous and it's too late for you to do this. And some people said, give me 1 lakh rupees and I'll get it done for you. So both of those were like not useful inputs for me. And so I decided to give it a shot anyway. And the optionals I took were, I thought, what if I don't clear? And if I have to go back to my life, what will be something new for me that adds value to my life? It won't be like I've spent 2 months rehashing something I already know. So I picked up public administration and sociology because they were very different from my engineering MBA background. And I thought, kuch naya seekh lenge. So I took those two subjects, and there was a study group near my house, and they used to a person who was attempting himself was used to run this because he had done several attempts and he kind of knew the subject matter, and he was almost like he was the convener of that group,
Group.
and many aspirants for the next batch were next year 2012 were preparing. So I used to sit with them and just listen to their discussions, and somebody got me notes from someone, and I like just mugged up some facts and understood a lot more about my country than I did before, at least history wise, and PubAd wise, of course. So वो सब किया, and then I wrote mains, and I think because I am a decent writer, otherwise I think that's why I cleared it because whatever little I knew, I was able to express it well,
Explain.
and maybe that's why. But I only just cleared it. Wasn't like a very great rank winning score, but I think it was. I only just made it, and then I wrote the mains and went back to my job in Mumbai, and then I remember in whatever Feb March, जब होता है interview, I had some injury and I just had a surgery for it, and I was recovering from my surgery, and I was in this haze of painkillers, and somebody came and told me तुम्हारा हो गया, and I was like what? And then next day and I went back to sleep, and then I woke up and I said, I had this funny dream that I cleared. And my parents were like, no, but you did. So then I went for my interview. By that time, thankfully, the painkillers had worn off, so I was able to give a coherent interview. Interview went much better than my written, I'm sure. So my score was good in the interview and bad in mains, and then you add it up, and my rank was 601. And then, yeah, that's it. That's the journey of the right exam.
Understood. And at this point, did you have a number in mind that I'll give this exam itna chance, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back to my old job? ऐसा कुछ you had planned, or you were just giving it sideways?
Yeah, my number was one. I decided that एक attempt में हो गया, नहीं तो it's okay. Life is good. I'll go. I've got a job. I'll continue working. So I didn't want to give it again and again.
Okay, okay, okay. So, okay, you gave the interview and then eventually you cleared the exam, which is great. I think सारे aspirants का ये dream है कि वो PDF में नाम आ जाए. But also, we know that there are these 2, 3 services that are given more priorities and more values. So, was there a sense of disappointment ever कि वो नहीं मिला, or like how was that when you saw the result?
Yeah, yeah, big time. So the idea in my mind was one attempt, and IAS is what I knew of. I didn't even know of the other services until I had to fill the form and choose options. And
Yeah.
उसमें भी I was like looking up on Google because like I said, nobody in my family is a civil servant. So I'm looking up कि ये service क्या करती है, ये service क्या करती है, and nobody in my circle was an aspirant either to tell me anything about it. So uh, So I had just filled ऐसे ही कि हाँ ठीक है IAS IFS उसके नीचे कुछ भी भर देंगे वो तो हमारा नंबर ही नहीं आएगा
Yeah.
तो जब वो नंबर आया then it was quite shocking for me and it was a huge adjustment like for a while I actually thought that I will not take whatever mm, in my mind blah blah service I'll get and I won't take it because I'm too high and mighty for anything other than IAS.
Yeah.
But then, so yeah, the day of the result, I was actually deeply disappointed, and people were calling me for interview lene ke liye and all that, and I was like, "Are you nuts? I have failed at what I was trying to go for here. Why, why would you want to take my interview?" So anyway, nobody knew me because Mumbai people didn't know me. I'm from Delhi. Delhi people didn't know me because I was nowhere on the aspirant radar. So like one or two Philly newspapers somehow found out and called me, and I was like in no shape to give them a coherent interview because I was like very disappointed, and I was crying, and I was like, yeah, this is not what I was aiming for. So why would you take my interview? I was literally questioning them for calling me. It was another very weird reaction. So yeah, it was quite disappointing for sure.
And at that point, did you think कि अच्छा maybe एक और attempt देने से the rank can improve? ऐसा कुछ afterthought था? Yeah.
नहीं यार I mean I'm a very one and done kind of person like even when I tried IIT JEE मेरा नहीं हुआ था पहली बार में और my rank was way too behind to get anything electronics computer level का which I wanted so I had not given it again but people do that also they take a year gap and give it again I was like जो college हो गया चले जाएंगे it's like I'm not going to do that again more than anything, it was more out of boredom. I think that I know myself and I
Okay.
can't do the same thing over and over again. And so for me, it was like a पढ़ लिया एक बार, and I've gotten like really deep into it, and I've understood a lot. I've gained a lot of knowledge. I think it was the only part, that part when I was preparing, the only point in my life when KBC आता था, so I would know all the answers, and everybody in my family would be like, "Who is this person who suddenly has this GK? Where did this
Yes.
come from, Mahima?" So, so I was like, हाँ मतलब पढ़ लिया सीख लिया now I can't do this again and again especially writing means which is really strenuous it's like 27 hours of writing right nine
Continuously. Yeah.
when I was writing it was like 9 exams of 3 hours each so 27 hours of writing just the physical effort of writing for 27 hours let alone the preparation is such a humongous thing. For me, there was not even on the radar
That
to
question.
do it again. But yeah, that question was not there. But so yeah, so the question was never reappearing. That was not a question in my mind at all. But whether I'll take the service I get or not was a question because again, like I said, I had no clue of what any other service does beyond IS. So then for a while I went back to my job and I was like, yeah, this is not happening. I told everybody around me that people would come and congratulate and I would be like, for what? Nothing is changing in my life. I'm continuing my job as it. Um, After a while, my parents were in Delhi. I was in Bombay. My parents went and, asked around a bit and I had got Indian Information Service. And so then they asked around, found somebody who had once worked in Doordarshan News and all, and they said, "Oh, no, it's a great service, and especially because your daughter likes writing, it's all about communication. It's a communicator service." And I mean, the more I also read up about it, it sounded like magically a good fit for me actually. So, and my idea was also that the one way that you can contribute to national development, which in my mind that was my road
Mm.
bottleneck for other services because I saw that the way I saw it was that IAS does direct implementation of government schemes and actual
Hmm.
developmental work, and
Yeah.
everybody else is doing ancillary work, which is not actually true. It was just my ignorance. But the way I saw IIS information service contributing to development was that you can kind of use these channels to make people more aware of their rights, of what they are entitled to under various government schemes and programs, and that could help in generating, just a demand for development, and that way it contributes to the development of the country also. So that was when slowly my mind changed and I realized that no, I've like I said, magically it seems like I've landed into a service where I'm
It's the
actually a
right
good fit.
fit. Yeah.
If I were if I'd even gotten IPS, I would have been a terrible police officer. I'm just not cut out like that. Uh, so even though I'd gotten a service which was way behind things like IPS and IRS and all of those, I felt like this was actually probably a very good fit for me, probably the next best fit after IS. So I decided to give it a chance, and then I quit my job and in August, and then September 2012 went for foundation course.
Right. So I think that happens with everyone, right? I think because we don't know about the other services, we just assume कि ये शायद नहीं है हमारे लिए. But if we just explore it better, maybe it will work better than the top services. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, actually, my very strong opinion on this is that I don't think there should be one exam for all services because I think it's a deep disservice to every other service.
Yes.
Now that I've seen that world and I know what each service does and what it all entails, everybody is doing a very crucial thing. It's important work. It is work that needs expertise, dedication, intelligence, and of various kinds of skills.
Right.
So this one exam fits all approach is, I think it's a terrible approach, and it's like doing a lot of disservice to our country because in every service other than IAS or IFS, you have people who wanted something else,
Yes.
and now they are stuck there for life, right? So it's a disservice to say the revenue service that it has officers who many of them for life will think kash aisa hota to waisa hota. And I've
Yeah.
seen that in my service also. A lot of IAS officers, I've seen people in their retirement speeches talking about मेरे ज्योग्राफी में उतने मार्क्स आए थे उतने नहीं उतने आते तो आज मैं वो होता. एंड आई बी लाइक कि ये क्या किया आपने अपनी पूरी लाइफ आपने बर्बाद कर दी एक चीज के पीछे जो आपको चाहिए नहीं थी और मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली आपने देश का पैसा बर्बाद किया द कंट्री हैज इन्वेस्टेड मनी इन यू and
Yes.
it's paying you money to do a job and instead of doing that job with your full dedication your half your mind is on what
Regretting.
ifs and yeah so that I think is a terrible model and it's just doing a lot of disservice to the country because also skill sets don't match so somebody who's an accountant chartered accountant would have been a great fit for say the revenue service will end up becoming a police officer has nothing no capabilities to bring to the table there and say somebody who's a communicator like me becoming a police officer again is a bad fit or somebody who's actually very good in direct implementation of law and order and has a passion for that is suddenly writing press releases in a job like mine. It's all a terrible
Yes.
randomized fitting of force fitting of people here and there with no regard for what their skill set is what their capabilities are just based on some essay we wrote about Vigyan Abhishap hai ki nahi hai, some random stuff like that.
Right.
You've tested a lot of irrelevant stuff and tested everybody on one metric, and everybody wanted that one thing, and now they're doing these 25 other things and doing them badly because their heart is not in, and they're not, their skills don't match it. So it's a very, very bad model.
Yeah.
The foreign forest service, for example, is a great
Yeah.
example of how separate exam, right? And I did FC. A lot of my FC batchmates were forest service officers. FC is foundation course, the 3 month course you do right after selection, and
Right.
उसमें all services are together. And उसके बाद you or each go to your own academies for your specialized training. So these 3 months where you meet people from other services also. And I did that in NADT in Nagpur, National Academy of Direct Taxes. So a lot of my FC batchmates were from forest service somehow. So there were two, three, maybe five, six services among us. And so then when I met them, they are people who are made for that. They've done zoology, botany as their graduation courses. We would go on a trek and they would pick up these tiny leaves and tell me like, oh, pata hai ye patta hai, isse ye hota hai, isse wo hota hai, or this area has this wildlife, and they're passionate about it. And you can see that they are in the right job and they're going to go ahead and do good work because they wanted this job, they're trained for this job and now been hired for this job. So why not have that model for every service, which is what I think every service deserves
Right.
and the aspirants.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a lot of overhauling done in the way this exam is conducted. that's a separate conversation altogether. But yeah, at least as aspirants, I think we should explore other services also. Okay, maybe there's something else that'll work better for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so then you decided to go ahead with this because you thought that this will be the right fit. What happened once you went in? Like, did it meet your expectations? How was that? How was that journey once you started working at the services?
So, yes and no. In many ways, it exceeded my expectations, especially the FC. Was like I said, I came from this IIT-IIM bubble where everybody around me was from that world. Although I work for a small consulting firm and there were not that many IIM graduates there, but and we worked with a lot of artists and anthropologists and Kafi. It was a much more democratic mix there. But even so, we were all like these urban English speaking people, right? And when you so from a certain typecast background, most of us. But when I went into FC is where I met a lot of my batchmates who come from rural backgrounds, people who'd come having faced caste discrimination and things like that, which in urban India is not even a part of our
Conversation.
reality. So for
Yeah.
me, yeah. So for me, these things were just alien, and to meet people and live with people who've been through all of that, who've had a very different trajectory from mine. It was a huge learning experience for me. Clearly, like broadened my mind a lot. So in that sense, it was exceeding my expectations. I could never have imagined even that my mind needed to be broadened because if it wasn't, then how would it know what it's missing? But once I got into the service, it was a little underwhelming because of what I said before. I think the most underwhelming aspect for me was that seeing seniors around you who are still disillusioned and who are
Right.
still and talking about अरे उसका प्रमोशन हमसे पहले हो गया वो इस बैच का है पर वो जीएस बन गया है और मैं इस बैच का हूँ पर मैं डायरेक्टर हूँ stuff like that which is I mean fair for them to fret about. Like I said, it's not their fault, it's the fault of the exam. They should not have been put through the same exam if you're going to put them on such different trajectories later.
Right.
So yeah, there was a lot of discontentment there, and because of that, not enough pride in the service. So, like I said, I felt that now that I'm here, let me give it my best and take it as a golden opportunity, which it is, to make a difference. But not everybody was thinking like that. Also, not everyone across services really thinks that their work begins after the exam. Most people, in my experience, think that the work ends when you clear the exam
Right.
because the selection process is so grueling. I had a very atypical process. So for me, the work was beginning. And as I saw it, it was like, अब काम शुरू करेंगे. And for them, it's like, अब पहुंच गए, अब
हो
हमारा
गया.
काम खत्म. Oh yeah, now we have job security for life. Now we are set. Now why are you worried about the country and minor stuff like that? So that was also an approach which I saw across batches, which also was very was not an encouraging thing to see as a young officer. So a couple of things like that. Yeah, there's this mindset. Also, it's real also of being sidelined as compared to that service. There's always that thing of comparison between this service and that service. And when it becomes a vicious cycle, when you don't have an self-esteem in your service, then also the other side does
Yeah.
not see it with respect. And
Right.
because others don't see it with respect, your
You
self-esteem
also.
goes lower.
Hmm.
So people were in that vicious cycle, I could see. So you're not questioning how can we do this better? Can we do something radically different? Because you're like, ये ऐसे होता है और ये ऐसे ही होता रहेगा और यही चलेगा. Until an order comes from above which changes things. For example, in the context of information service, I was there as a probationer starting 2013. And from that time, I was talking about everywhere I would go and put up proposals, sir, ma'am, why don't we go more on social media? They used to call it new media. It was not new at that time, but they still called it new media. So I'd be like, अच्छा ये media new आया है. So we should have a bigger presence. The youth of the country is there. We need to talk to them. And they're like, नहीं, हम bulletin बनाएंगे news का. 7 बजे का bulletin ये होगा, 8 बजे का bulletin ये होगा. That's it. That's our job. So it was, and then I kept pushing and I kept getting rejected, and people would laugh down it. अरे आप youngsters आप लोगों के दिमाग में कुछ और ही चलता है. You people don't know realities. And then a year later, another government comes to power and they suddenly go heavy on social media. And the next day, everybody has a handle on Twitter.
Right.
So it's like, it's very disillusioning to see that something that you wanted to do for the right reasons for so long did not get pushed. And then somebody had some other reasons to do it, and suddenly overnight it works because there's a political will behind it now. So yeah, that those kinds of experiences were really disillusioning for me because it felt like I'm wasting my youth and the best years of my life trying to push an immovable wall and trying to push it and move it. It's not going to work. So that's why then after 3 years, I in the 3 years I did work that I'm quite proud of. I was selected for the Prime Minister's unit in PIB when the new government came in, and they did a whole revamping of that unit for the Prime Minister's office's publicity, which obviously went through a much bigger overhaul in
Right.
2014. So 2014-15, I was there in that office and working crazy hours. We would be up at 4 a.m. because the Prime Minister is in US making a speech at Madison Garden, and we are like, yeah, but हम press release, tweeting, and all of that, infographics, ये सब कर रहे होते थे, and it was exciting at the time. But then I did not see a great
Long term.
future. Yeah, so that's why when I put in my papers in November after a lot of soul searching, November 2015, and then December that I was out.
Right. Then you eventually decided to discontinue, right? यहाँ पे the question is, we as aspirants, some of us end up spending 4-5 years just preparing for this exam, and उसके बाद to even think of quitting the preparation process is very difficult. So I can imagine how difficult it must have been to quit the services once you've got this thing that everybody's running after, है ना? So what was that decision like? Was it an easy decision to take, or what was the reaction around you?
For me personally, it was an easy decision because I was frankly depressed. Yeah, I was very disillusioned. I was not, like I said, seeing a great future there. And I would wake up by the end of my third year there, I was like waking up tired and not able to sleep at night, and going through all the. I mean, I took online quizzes to see what's happening, and all signs pointed to depression. So I was like physically, mentally drained completely, and it was not possible for me to go on. So, and then, like I said, it was not even a decision of being frustrated in that moment, because then you can just apply for a transfer out of a particular role if you're frustrated with it. But it was a despondence about the future, the hopelessness about the future, because I could see 30 years down the line, there's a building in Shastri Bhavan, उसमें एक corridor है, वो शुरू में assistant director यहाँ बैठता है, फिर deputy director, ADG, DG. So you can literally see your life in one corridor going forward 30 years. So it was, and I did not see great hope in the future either. So for me, personally, it was not a very hard decision to make, because it was literally for me a life or death question. It was a life saving decision for me. But it was hard to convince people around me for sure. It
Right.
was hard to convince even my own bosses who were like, "Arey, you have so much potential. Why?" It was hard to convince my parents, my family. My husband, thankfully, was could see what I'm going through, and for him, because he's also an officer, he's still in the government. But at that point, he could see what I was going through and how it was completely untenable for me to go on. And so yeah, one or two seniors who I respected a lot, they told me that it is the right decision for you, and a couple of the people even said that we wish we had taken this decision when we were at your age or your stage of the service, because you're right about the future. What do you think about it? So in that sense, that was heartening, and it was a great confirmation of what I was feeling. And my parents were a little harder to convince, my family, but then again, I told them it's a question of my health, and
Health.
I'm just not able to go on like this, and they could also see that I was suffering. So yeah, eventually people came around. Some people to this day don't understand. Even now, when I tell people, half the people will say, "Oh, you made the worst mistake of your life," and things like that. But but none of it is, if you ask two more questions uske aage, then none of it is really rooted in any reality. It's just
Logic.
an
Yeah.
assumption people make. It's just an impression they have about this being the end of life. It is not at all the end of life to not be a civil servant. So, and as the show's community, I'm sure many of you all know very well. It's just a transition. It was not that
Right. We would love to know more about your journey post that. Like, what was that like? How did you decide कि अब क्या करना है? And I think you were working in the development sector for some time as well, and then eventually you started writing your newsletter as well. So just take us through that journey.
Yeah. So I took a month leave before I put in my papers. And I did some solo travel and soul searching. Like I said, I talked to a lot of people. I didn't take that decision lightly or overnight. So even after I thought, maybe I need a break, and maybe if that resets my brain and I'm able to find the will to go on. But if anything, the break kind of solidified my decision, and I felt more stronger than ever that that is not the right path for me. So so being a good middle class child, I didn't want to quit without another job in hand, which is also, I think, the only thing my parents said was, okay, if you want to quit, quit, but don't do it without a job in hand. So I searched for a job also in that time, and I luckily found one with Tata Trusts. Because Mr. Ratan Tata had just taken over the trusts at that time, and they were used to be various, some 20 different trusts, Jamshedji Trust and Sir Ratan Tata Trust, and all of these different 20-25 trusts were there, and he had just taken over, and he was combining them under one brand called Tata Trusts.
Right.
And for that, they were hiring a lot of new blood, and they work a lot with the government, so they were very happy with having a ex civil servant on board. So they made an offer, and I immediately accepted. And then I told them I just need a month to give my notice and all of that. So I did all that and pushed that file through all the corridors. Got told off by everybody at various levels of how what a big mistake I'm making, etc. But some people were kinder, and some people said, "Yeah, it means the right decision. I wish I had done this." So anyway, at the end of it all, I had that job. So I literally quit on 30th November, and on 1st December went to work for Tata Trust. I worked there for within 1 or 2 months. They said that there's this new secretary who's joined the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. His name is Mr. Parmeshwar Nair, and he was a World Bank professional. He used to be an IAS. Then he quit the service and went to work for World Bank in water sanitation and hygiene. And now he's been brought back as a lateral hire, and probably one of the first few secretaries who were lateral hires to run the Swachh Bharat mission. And he just needs more young blood in his office to kind of settle down in his office and put things in place. So you go and Tata Trust head office is in Delhi, in Mumbai, and I was in Delhi. So they said कि जाओ वहाँ पे 1-2 हफ्ता उनका help कर दो थोड़ा सा to settle them in. You are a former civil servant, so you will know you'll be able to help him transition. So I went for ek do hafta and ended up staying for 5 years because he and me and another colleague was there, and the secretary really liked us and valued our inputs in the various things he was doing. And so he ended up keeping us as his core team. And so I worked on the Swachh Bharat mission on there, and I was actually ironically now doing what I was supposed to do
Yeah.
in IIS but never got a chance to do, which is that I designed the behavior change campaign for Swachh Bharat mission, encouraging rural Indians to use toilets. The things that I had in mind that IAS would do and be an opportunity to do, make people aware of their rights and of government schemes that can help them. Exactly that work I got to do after I quit service. So I did that for 5 years. It was excellent, amazing work. It was exhausting and very, very grueling, but I loved every minute of it. I got to directly another pro of being outside the government is that you're not a part of the hierarchy anymore. So otherwise I would probably never get to work directly with the secretary, or when I was 60 years old, I would have gotten a chance in IAS. But here I was directly working with the secretary, directly telling him, कल रात को मुझे ये idea है sir, why not we do it like this? And then he'd say, oh wow, brilliant idea, let's do it like this. And so you had direct access and very quick decision making. And he's also a very quick decision taker. He doesn't say, oh, file put up करो नीचे से ऊपर चलेगी चलेगी तो 1 महीने बाद मेरे पास पहुंचेगी फिर sign करेंगे. So he was a very quick decision maker, and I mean, it was a great match that way of our energies. So I got to do some great work there. So 5 years I worked there, and then I went on maternity leave, and by the time I came back, COVID had begun. 1 year into COVID, the secretary also left because 2019, the anyway Swachh Bharat missions phase one goal was
Right.
milestone was achieved, and so we were doing in phase two, and there was a pandemic, and things were anyway a little slow, and he decided it was a time for him to transition back to the bank. So he made an offer to me that why don't you come with me and work in the bank in my team there. So I went with him. I went in the sense I was working from home in Delhi like everybody else, but he was in Washington. So
Mm.
for me, with a new baby, it also worked out well because I could work at night, and then my husband could handle the baby at night, and we could do day night switch like that. When he went to work, I could stay at home and not have office because my office was day night. So that was a good 1 साल का contract that went off, and thankfully the pandemic kind of we sailed through that on, on that job, on the bank of that job. Then after that contract got over, I had worked a lot with other development partners also during those 5 years of Swachh Bharat, and one of them was UNICEF. And the people at UNICEF had told me even before I had left for my maternity leave that you should once you're back, if you no longer
Yeah.
want to be in this role, consider give me a call and we'll figure out something. We want to work with you. So so that was it was basically just good work, word of mouth that kind of goes across, and people who work with you and are impressed with your caliber and professionalism. That is what I mean. I've realized in the later stages of your career that is what sails you through it, because as you rise up to mid management, it's no longer sending a CV and introducing yourself in the cold way that you do as a fresher.
Right.
So then, UNICEF, there was an opening coming up at around that time for an emergency wash coordinator, which means water sanitation, but with an emergency context of, with climate change, recurrent floods and droughts and hurricanes and cyclones. Your toilets are getting washed away. You're putting down water infrastructure, it's getting broken down. How is your wash infrastructure reacting to those calamities? Because I realized once I joined that job that in the 5 years of Swachh Bharat, we never actually sat and thought about, oh, but baad aa gayi, so toilet
Disaster.
बह
हाँ.
जाएगा. Because you think that you built a toilet and now it's what you call an ODF village, an open defecation free village. Everybody has a toilet. More or less everybody will sooner or later start using it. And so it's an ODF village. But you don't think that in a village in
Water.
Bihar, every year there'll be a flood and every year all the toilets will get washed away.
Right.
So that was an aspect that I hadn't worked on it during Swachh Bharat, and I got a chance to work on it in UNICEF. So for the last 2 years, I was with UNICEF working on that. I wrote the disaster management plan of the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, the first DMP of for sanitation in our country. So I got a chance to write that, and again work with my old colleagues from drinking water and sanitation, many of whom have now moved on, but some are still there. And yeah, so last year, in December 2020, I also started writing Womaning in India. This is a separate passion project, and I had this idea in mind for maybe 2 3 years even before that. But because I was so busy with the Swachh Bharat work, I never got a chance to, and many other excuses that writers make for not writing. All of those excuses apply. Ultimately, I think it was during the pandemic where I just felt like this helplessness about. I've always felt very strongly about gender and about the way the all of the ways in which the world is unfair, more towards women, but also towards men. So I had this idea of uh, how if I write opinion pieces about it, I know I can write well, but it's not going to convince anybody because people have made up their mind already, and one person's opinion will not change your mind. But what I've realized over the years is that stories can change your mind when it is real people and their real stories. Even data, which is actually many more people and many more stories, does not have that impact. If you tell that, oh, during the pandemic, domestic violence rose by itna percent. as
Right.
per the National Crime Records Bureau. People will read that number and forget it the
Okay.
next day or maybe even the next minute.
Yeah.
Most people will. I mean, the people who matter probably, I hope, are paying more attention, but most people like us will not probably remember. But if you hear like a very gut-wrenching story of somebody and who went through something like this, then it might stick with you much longer and might even have an impact on changing your mind about things. So my idea was this, that I'm going to write stories of real women and use those stories to highlight gender bias issues that I see everywhere around me. But people don't see them because until you're, it's actually just a matter of perspective. Once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. But until then, it feels normal to you.
Yeah.
So even my entire childhood and young adulthood, I have faced so much gender-based discrimination and not seen it as problematic. I've seen it as normal. This is how the way the world is. Uh, I mean, at the middle of the night, you want to go out for a walk. A man can get up and walk out in his shorts and not worry. And a woman just simply can't. For many, many reasons, she just can't. She
Right.
can't forget in the middle of the night in her shorts. In most parts of India, a woman still can't go out at any hour.
Right. Exactly.
And going on a walk is a male privilege. It's just a thing that's not even in a woman's radar. It doesn't even occur to us anymore as an option. And so it feels normal to us कि नहीं हम रात को बाहर नहीं जा सकते. But then if you think about it and question it, क्यों नहीं जा सकते? What is the big difference between men and women? So there's clearly a difference, right? So there's no denying that there is a gender angle to every small thing that we do. The way we walk down the street, the way we dress, the way we think, everywhere it's there. So that was my idea, and I stalled it for 2 3 years, and then until the pandemic, when I felt like I need to do more than I'm doing. It was just a lot of frustration of the pandemic, and being a new mother brings with it a lot more gender challenges than maybe I should send something to them. So that's how it became a newsletter, and then that kind of was really did work very well for me because it brings in that discipline of writing week on week. As
Right.
I'm speaking, I'm realizing the hypocrisy of saying this right now because I haven't written right now for a month, but I'm in the middle of a big cross country move, so I'm letting myself make this exception.
Uh,
But otherwise, yeah, it's been the only thing that has led to consistent writing for me.
what has been really interesting is कि once you left the services, you found that sweet spot जहाँ पे you are enjoying your work, you are able to make a difference still in a different manner, right? मतलब we have this idea that you have to be in the government to actually make a larger impact, but ऐसा कुछ नहीं. You can even write a newsletter and that can create a change on its own now. मतलब even something as small as that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I also learned that, my singular focus was making a difference. And it sounds very lofty right now, but as a youngster, it didn't. I was like, I'm going to change the world, make a difference, contribute,
All been there.
leave some impact, all of those good things. And for me, again, like you said, it seemed like UPSC or the civil services was a good channel to do it. But then I realized that I'm doing much more of it post the service. The
Right.
service actually had shackled me in these invisible ways that I couldn't see at the time, but I could feel that frustration, that undefined frustration inside me because I felt like I can do much more than I'm doing here right now. And it truly did work out that way because fortunately all those opportunities was apparently just waiting outside the door. And the moment I opened the door, they came. And
Right.
then I got to do really the work that I dreamt of doing. And it was not obviously all hunky dory. Nothing is perfect. No job is perfect. No life is perfect. But uh, definitely that aspect of work where you go to bed feeling like I made a difference today. And maybe somebody's life somewhere is a little better today because of what I did at work today. That feeling I did not get all through my service. I got very, very brief glimpses of it in portions where I was coloring outside the lines. Whenever
Right.
I stepped outside the line, I would get a little bit brief glimpse of it, but otherwise staying within the lines, I never got it there. So I got it a lot in holds after quitting the service. And I'm getting it now with the work I'm doing now. Every week people write to me about how something I've written, something I've said in a podcast or an interview like this has changed their lives, has left an impact. It has led to a meaningful conversation with their spouse, with their children, with their parents. And those are like really tangible, exact one line impact that you see. Even in Swachh Bharat, it was like, I maybe made an ad today, which will 2 months later, some woman in some village will see it and demand a toilet from
Yeah,
the husband, and then they'll build a toilet. And maybe something I've done today will non-linearly lead to some
eventually. Yeah,
result somewhere, but it's unseen, and I can't, ascribe it 100% to me. But here, when I am writing and somebody's reading and telling me how directly I had an impact, it's really, really, I mean, I've never felt impact like this before.
no, that's actually very motivating. You can try different things and you can figure out your own path, for all of us here.
Yeah.
So now that you've seen both sides of the um, sector, what is the advice that you would give to people who are currently preparing and also to those who are looking to transition into something different, maybe in the development sector?
Yeah, for people who are currently preparing, one advice that I've given ever since I've figured out what this UPSC world is don't quit your job. I mean, you have some sort of job, even if having a full-time job and doing full-time studies is difficult. I understand that, but have some sort of vocation and productive direction in which you are growing apart from UPSC. So yes, you are preparing, but don't make that your only
Right,
only engagement in life. Yes, समय में क्या कर रही हूँ सिर्फ यही कर रही हूँ मैं और कुछ नहीं कर रही हूँ. Do something else. Have a hobby. Maybe go volunteer in an NGO or teach some students anything. You could be doing it as a paid job, as an unpaid gig, as a hobby, but have some way in which you continue to grow and challenge yourself, and don't delay that impact for after I do UPSC, then I'll have an impact. If you want to make an impact, like we are just talking about, you can make an impact at any time in any position. You can literally pick up your domestic help child and teach them English or maths at home. You can do, and everybody has that scope of making small impacts. So don't think that only once I become a collector and then I will build 1
definitely.
million toilets and change the lives of 1 million people. No, you can start small, you can start now and do that, because that not only is that here and now, first of all, that's direct impact you're making, but also you are for yourself, it's a great confidence booster. So
Right,
because you are not, because if you do that, you will not attach your entire self-esteem to the outcome of one exam. And let's face it, it's a very fickle exam. It makes no sense at all. Somebody like me prepares for 2 months and clears, and then there are people who've been studying hard for 7 years and still not clearing. And it's not a question of, oh, this is just merit. It's not just merit. It's a lot of luck. And you can have a good day, you can have a bad day. On that day, your examiner might have had a bad day, and he's got indigestion, and so you've got less marks and you didn't clear because of that. It's completely nuts. So
right.
it's not in your control, and you should not attach your entire self-esteem to that one crazy outcome of a completely unpredictable process.
Yeah, I think very practical advice. And last but not the least, I don't think we can end this conversation without touching upon the womaning aspect of it, because obviously, like every other experience, ये भी gendered and like most of my female aspirants, they have this deadline कि ठीक है एक और attempt and then otherwise their parents are going to get them married. या तो IAS या तो शादी. That's the plan B. So what would you like to say to them, to the women aspirants of this community? Any special message?
Yeah, I mean, the same message, but 100 times more important for women. Because as a woman, if again your entire role thing you're doing in your life is IAS, then uske baad फिर backup शादी बचता है. And
Right,
that's really not a good reason to get married, right? Like UPSC में वैसे शादी करने. I mean, शादी is literally the biggest decision of your life, and even UPSC is not as big as that. It's going to affect the rest of your life. Who you marry, what kind of family they have, whether you have kids, you don't have kids, all of those things, whether you marry or you don't marry, these are
right,
all the biggest life choices actually that we make in our lives, because our life partner can truly make or completely destroy our life. And so these decisions should not be made based on UPSC का fickle exam हुआ कि नहीं हुआ. And so 100 times more for women that have
fine.
an existence beyond UPSC, have a passion beyond UPSC, have a competence beyond UPSC. Um, uh, Again, I see that I also have friends who've not cleared, and then family is saying कि अच्छा तो फिर अब तो कुछ हुआ नहीं, अब तो शादी कर लो. I mean, even when you clear, by the way, there is that pressure of अच्छा अब हो गया अब
हो
शादी
गया.
कर लो. So either way, अब तो हो गया तो शादी कर लो, नहीं हुआ तो शादी कर लो. So the world will only have this one bean to bajao in front of you, no matter what happens to you. So you have to, by the time that deadline comes, and which comes for most Indian women, it's a non-negotiable, at least from our family side, and you have to really fight hard if you want to fight it. And if you want to fight it, more power to you. But if you do want to eventually get married, make sure that you know who you are before you do that. And to know who you are, you can't just read one history book and one bad book, and that will not tell you who you are. So you have to live life. Don't put life on pause. Experience life, experience new things, travel. Like I said, volunteer. Maybe do a job, do an internship, do something beyond UPSC. To it will help you know who you are, and that will help you choose a better life partner if that is what you want to do. And it also help you choose, stand up to that pressure, if you have that sort of self-esteem. Even financial empowerment is important there, because if you have a paycheck, it makes a marked difference to your bargaining power with society, with family. If you don't have an income, you are much more susceptible to that pressure, of undue pressure of शादी करो, इससे करो, अभी करो, इस टाइम करो, इस चीज के लिए करो. So all of that you can fight back much better if you have a sense of self and a self-esteem, which UPSC is not allowed to destroy, and B, you preferably have a financial security as well, because even in cases where you have to fight family, it's not possible if you don't have a paycheck. So same advice, but like I said, 100 times more for women.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for actually taking up the time and sharing your experiences very candidly. I really think that this would be a very useful video for the community, and I hope that everyone comes out of it inspired to think about what is it that they really want to do and work towards it, and understand कि बहुत सारे ways, whatever it is that you want, there are different ways to achieve that. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Gayatri.